like, speaking of, I keep getting this thing that's been tickling my mind, like I can almost see, it's like my mind is trying to invent the equivalent of biochemistry for egregores, and I can almost see in mechanical detail how the co-intelligence arises and what participation looks like on the individual scale. Like I have a lot of the pieces, same as you do. But there's one fragment that's been bouncing around, like, oh, this is not quite articulated all the way, but there's something very close here. There's this element that I keep coming back to about how, like if you look at how collective intelligence would have to work in order to address something like climate change. It can't do it because of just some sort of coincidental arising of people doing their own thing with their gardens and some people raising their kids, etc. Because that would mean that the center of, like, the wide vision of this is the whole problem and this is how we need to orient to it wouldn't happen anywhere. And that would mean that there would be no place that thinking could occur in order to get the full context. So I think what this means is, in order for the co-intelligence to be able to do something sensible about something on the scale of climate change, it has to think with, I mean, any egregore has to think with the minds of those whom it's writing.
Yeah.
So I definitely don't have all the details sorted out here, but there's a piece here of, when I get very clear about the difference between what is mine to choose and what is not, which I mean something very mechanical. I mean, what do I have the power to unilaterally choose? Like I can unilaterally choose where my cup is on the table, but I cannot unilaterally choose the nature of our connection. So when I get really clear about that, I can have preferences about the things that are not mine to choose. But the only way I can actually participate in making a request of that system is by understanding it. And the understanding actually is more powerful if it is something in the direction of opinion neutral. So the thing that would matter for something like dealing with climate change is not, do I know what needs to happen for climate change, or who do I think we should elect for office, or whatever, but is instead, can I understand the mechanisms, the social and the physical mechanisms of what's going on? If I can contribute that understanding, then my mind becomes more available in my contact with others. And to the extent that we have shared maps, then the co-intelligence has something more like centers to think with. So this suggests two kinds of work on the individual scale for sane co-intelligence to arise. One is the individual work of separating out what is actually my responsibility from what isn't. And the second is, for the things that you're not responsible for action, you can accept responsibility for understanding.
Are you pointing, it seems like there's sort of two pieces here. One is like that understanding might flow into clarity of your own or others' actions kind of in a pretty direct way, like just as you interface with them. The other is something like, insofar as there's distributed cognition going on, you are participating in that.
Exactly.
But
you're removing the willful element of, and this is my opinion about how we should do the whole thing, because that's like, it's conflating two different pieces, which is, I have a preference for what I want to experience in my life and for the things that I want to have in my world. But my primary contribution is not my preference. My primary contribution is the interaction between my preference and an understanding. The whole system is not something like, and this is where some of the details get a little fuzzy for me, but there's a quality here of this feels like a more detailed version of the whole coming age of prayer thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Part of where this started to gel was yesterday I did a live stream on abortion. And part of what I think I was able to navigate it very skillfully, and such that there were people on a couple of different sides of this who were there in the live stream, and I managed to hold the space and talk about this thing without creating any explosions at all. And this wasn't because I was holding back. It was because I was being very clean about, these are the things that matter to me. Here are my unknowns. And here is what I do know about the whole picture that I'm very clear about at a theorem level.
Right. And so then you abstracted what you had managed to do there into a more general pattern of how people can participate in co-intelligence.
Yeah. And in the process of doing that, I noticed that it was easier for me to notice the places that are incomplete about my own understanding that I hadn't been letting myself fully see because of the belief that I had to hold to a position about this thing that I can't choose anything about.
Yeah.
Or else thing.
Yeah.
But if I get internally, my job is not to have an opinion about the big thing.
Yeah.
My job is to understand it.
Yeah. This feels related to a thing that I've been quipping for a while, which I'm not sure that I invented this, but I may have invented this version of it, maybe inspired by somebody else. Everybody's critiques of politics, I basically agree with. Everybody's solutions are shit.
Yeah.
And what this highlights is like the critiques are coming from people saying there's some unmet need here. The solutions are bullshitting themselves into thinking that they know what needs to happen. Clearly, it's this. Never mind the fact that that would create a dozen enemies who would immediately tear down all of your progress, let alone like would create other side effects that nobody would even notice until it was bad or whatever else. Like,
yeah. I have an intuition that I haven't thought through basically at all, but it's like, oh, I think you prove the theorem this way. It's that kind of intuition. Which is that if you have a system where there is a literally superhuman problem, egregore scale problem, and each node, each person in this structure, not necessarily each person, but enough people in this system are seeking primarily to understand the question. Then what happens is the act, for each individual, the act of seeking produces dialogue that results in fleshing out the model for others. So any pieces you have of the model ends up going into theirs and vice versa. So that ends up creating, instead of just map fragments, like the way that you can cover the globe with flat maps, even though you can't flatten any part of the globe. That's instead of doing something like that, you end up building a globe model, in this metaphor, in each person. And that when it gets close enough that you can all look at each other and get the common knowledge understanding of, oh, so this is the answer, or this is an answer.
Yeah. And I'm imagining what that would feel like would be something like, oh, so of course you're going to do that, and I'm going to do this, and you're going to do that, and when we do that, and I do that, then that'll let you do this thing, and then when you do that, like however convoluted or straightforward it feels. The point being, it's like there would be common knowledge that we would all like to do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so game theoretically at that point, you've emerged the omni-win stable point.
Exactly.
Like by changing the game, which is of course what positive sum game theory is all about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think that it has to arise by some anti-adversarial, not just non-adversarial, but something like anti-adversarial model sharing process.
Anti-adversarial. That's a funny word.
It is a funny word. but what I'm accounting for here is like this is a classic version of like the game A, game B collision of what happens if somebody has enough of a map model. Like if you toss a Brent into a situation like this, a lot of times you're going to end up with warpy effects because the trust dance process of engaging with that person is going to be a gargantuan jump compared to everybody else.
Yes. Yeah.
And that person may correctly model that fact and inject an adversarial element into it to get their needs met, so that they can prevent what they see as the group's likely convergence on just shoving this person off to the side long enough to deal with the thing.
Yeah.
Right. So somehow that mechanism at the meta level would have to be folded into the process itself in a way that does not jam the process.
One thing that I wanted to just kind of pull back in here is, when you talk about something as big as climate change, right? I think there's a lot of juice to be found in also just like feeling into the scales in between those things, right? So it's like, I don't have control over, I can choose to move my finger, but like I can't choose to, concretely move a piano. Like I need somebody's help if I'm going to move a piano. Although ideally I'd like something like a little bit bigger than that, right? Like there's types of software projects I couldn't achieve on my own or something. Even those are slightly too concrete. Like because I do want something that still has the quality of the understanding thing.
So the example that actually leaped to mind for me when you were describing, when you're saying, oh yeah, and then of course it's going this omni-win ...
Yeah.
And I felt like yes, that is exactly the thing I'm pointing at. The sort of seed example I use in the back of my mind is what this structure looks like in a romantic relationship. Because that's exactly the kind of thing of getting this deeper and more right is why Cecile and I were able to break up beautifully. In the process of dropping into a relationship where the truth of the connection can
right, you were like you were focusing on understanding it more deeply rather than trying to control each other. Right,
and it is absolutely omni-win. And neither of you have any say. Sorry, that isn't quite what I mean. Neither of you get to say what the relationship can be. The unilateral power each of you has
is to say what it can't be.
Right. You can opt out of some option that it could have had.
Yeah.
Right. You can bid for particular illusions, and if you both buy into the same illusion, then you can pretend that that illusion is the nature of the relationship. But even then, you can't choose that the illusion is what you will participate in. I mean, sorry, you can choose that you will participate in this illusion if that's possible.
Yeah.
But you can't choose that it's possible.
Yeah. Interesting.
So, so just looking at what, it's funny that there's something funny about saying, oh yeah, we could boil the problem of climate change down to the easier problem of solving romantic relationships.
Well, don't forget the kitchen sink. I mean, what I was actually thinking you were going to say with romantic relationships was not the thing with you and Cecile, although that is such a great example because, omni-win doesn't mean together.
Right.
Inherently. But like I was thinking, Pardon?
The abstract example that I had in mind was about it working out for a couple to be together.
Yeah. But even separate from the scale of just working out or not, like that big thing. There's even just like, hey, suppose it isn't even a romantic relationship. Suppose it's just roommates, right? And they realize that, one of them really likes cooking and the other really likes cleaning up. It's like, wait, we could be doing way more group food, actually. Like, I don't cook as much as I would like to because I don't like having to clean up all the whatever. And it's like, well, I would be happy to eat more group food and happy to clean up after it. So,
yeah.
And it's like, that's just this really simple example of like, oh shit, we found a win-win. Like, there's just like, now that I know this, I'm just gonna do it. Like, and in particular, it's like the person who likes cleaning up in general. It's like, even if they're having a day where they don't feel as motivated to clean up, they would still, I think, feel more inclined towards, in a genuine way, not a guilt-based way, more inclined towards cleaning up that day anyway, because of how much they enjoy the satisfaction of their roommate never having to worry about that, and how that contributes to the flow of the cooking happening smoothly and consistently.
Right. Yeah.
They're like, it's like, I don't really feel like it, but like, this is so great that like, of course I'm gonna just like do it anyway.
Yeah, I like the concreteness of the example.
Yeah.
It's tickling something of that, in that I've had that kind of experience.
Yeah.
Or rather, I have the intuition of having had that kind of experience. I'm having a hard time pulling up a concrete example in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there must be a bazillion tiny things like that. Like, this is not really a full example, but a minor one is I've come to realize that after I have lunch with my parents, if I can wedge myself in front of the sink before my dad gets there, then because I know which dishes go in the dishwasher and which ones don't, and dad has a hard time keeping track of this.
Mm-hmm.
The whole kitchen cleanup goes about twice as fast. And so and I'm happy to do that. And he doesn't care what part of the cleanup he does. He just wants to do a good job. And so, like,
right.
Like,
so there's a way in which you are like dancing around him a little bit to create something that ends up being a win-win. Sort of.
Right. This is actually not a good example because there is a way in which I'm holding the model and he keeps not tracking this.
Yeah.
But anyway, the thing that was
it's kind of an okay example of a partial win, like or a like in the meantime solution or something like that.
It's a top-down win-win.
Well, but there's something cool though here because like you're finding something that works better for you that is within your capacity to choose, even though it involves him. Like you don't need to get him to change in order to have found this way of relating that generates better results for you.
Exactly.
So that's actually that's a neat case study there.
Yeah.
So it's like your understanding of him enables that.
Yes.
But
exactly.
the thing I was trying to get at earlier, well, I mean, I think the dishes example is a pretty good one. But I was just trying to get at, like, there's examples that don't involve nearly the same like understanding click moment, in the same way that like there's not a deep understanding click when I choose to like move my finger or whatever. Like that, there's a different thing going on there, right? Like I just obviously have the agency to do that. If I want to, I just do whatever. There are things that a group obviously has the agency to do, like, move a piano or something like that. And so then it's like, what does group will mean in that context? And there's just sort of a slightly interesting puzzle there. Like, what does it mean for the group to sort of be aware of what it can do, and then something? Anyway, more to talk about there.
Yeah. When I imagine, I really like zooming in on these smaller examples, and I notice the place that my mind goes to is like popping back to the large scale, because there are some relevant differences. I haven't felt them all out, because like in a small scale, you can all physically be in the same room and then look around, and you can catch if there's going to be a click, you can catch the moment the click happens.
Yeah.
On a global scale, I don't think there would be a moment of click. There would be sort of these waves as the approximations of common knowledge start to go through different aspects, and as the thing starts to become
yeah. I mean, common knowledge does sometimes have this cascading quality to it, where like one thing happens and that produces a like, oh, but if I know that, then like,
right, you start to deduce common knowledge over the course of some time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was a particular example that I think is funny and kind of instructive, which is early on in mine and Sarah's conversations with each other. I think before we were even talking about each other as partners in any serious sense, sometime in like April or May of 2017, we were talking about Burning Man and how we'd both been, and we were thinking of going again. And I should pull up the exact order of the exchange. Let me see if I can remember it. It was something like, oh, I said, I think it would be cool to go to Burning Man with you. And she said, I would love to go to Burning Man if I had a ticket. And I said, I have 2 tickets. And suddenly we were going to Burning Man together. Like we discovered we were going to Burning Man together in that moment. Like, because there was like this conditional check, like.
Yes, that is really cool.
Yeah,
it's like social programming.
Yeah. It's the best example I have of a common knowledge cascade. It's like the moment I said.
That's a really good example.
The moment I said, "Well, I have 2 tickets."
It's like did it. Yeah.
It's like I guess we're going to Burning Man together. Like.
Yeah. There's an element that I don't know if this happened for you too, but I know that in that moment I would discover whether I meant what I said.
Yeah. I would say that was true. There was like a kind of wait, like we kind of both were like, oh, are we actually doing this? Yeah, I guess we are. Like,
cool.
Yeah.
There's one other bit about the global scale thing that I wanted to say. It's still an intuition.
Yeah.
I'm feeling into something like the experience of a solution clicking into place. Like if you say, hey, let's do recycling that make it actually work or something like that, if that was like part of the solution of the eventual thing, and just as a concrete thought experiment. Like if that was part of the thing, the way that it would occur would be not that there'd be this piece of information that would float through saying this is the decided plan and this is how we're doing it. Mm-hmm. It would instead be over time, like my own experience, like as an agent would be that my model of how the whole thing works would be getting richer and richer. Mm-hmm. And then at some point I would start to wonder, wait, wouldn't this change in behavior do it? Mm-hmm. I think it would. And then I would hear it from somebody else. Mm-hmm. Right. And then as I hear it from more and more places, and like I see Twitter starting to get flooded with, hey guys, did we just do it? Right. And there would be this sense of, I think so. And so the fact that it had spontaneously occurred in many people and was being shared and the cascade was finished would have this effect of, I guess I'm now going to set out 5 bins or whatever it is. Because it would just be like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny to imagine it being that simple, but totally. Like I think you're basically spot on about the feeling. Like and the mention of Twitter I think is not incidental. Like Jack Dorsey commented recently that he's like, Twitter is the closest thing we have to a global consciousness. Yep. It's one big field. Parts of me are worried about like the thing Twitter's adding where you can like send your tweets not to everybody, but I mean there's already locked alts. I think it'll ultimately be fine. And in some ways this is arguably better because it means you can have a single account that has some amount of private, like it's almost like it creates the possibility for short range neurons as well as long range ones, more so, like kind of.
Yeah.
And insofar as like part of what's going on in the brain, like the computation is happening it is happening with kind of clusters of neurons, basically. I mean, this is already obviously happening on Twitter. It's just like those conversations get overheard, sometimes for great good, but then also sometimes for great shit show.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how much it swings in the direction of creating siloed chunks. Because if people start participating primarily in the isolated ones, and that would actually break Twitter's function.
Well, and I think they've actually done something clever with that, probably, which is that, well, I'm not sure, but one way that you could solve that is by making the siloed chunks not that easy to use.
Yep.
Or something, right? Like if you make this in the same way that, I mean, Twitter is such a beautiful example of the power of constraints, right? With the character limit. And like similarly, if you constrain the communities in a particular way such that it doesn't work that well to be somebody who only tweets into a community or something, or like not, or that's just not what most people are inclined to do, or whatever, like something like that. Yeah. I mean, you still need people to follow you, and you can only get followers by tweeting publicly, approximately, or by already being famous. But like,
yeah.
Oh, this is good shit.
This is good shit. I'm gonna want to wind down
Me
soon. I have
too,
a call in about an hour, and I want to. Also, my body just wants some rest.
Yeah.
But I have been having a lot of fun with this.
Yeah.
You just said, "Hey, let's talk this afternoon."